Welcome to the Women of Ambition podcast. I'm your host, Alyssa Collar-Hume. Today I'm talking with Karissa Lemme. Karissa recently returned to work for the Quality Parenting Initiative, which is a nonprofit that helps reform the foster system. As a foster parent herself and a mother, Karissa is perfectly positioned to talk on these topics. We talk about the foster care system and returning to work and motherhood. We cover a lot of amazing topics. This one's a little bit longer, but it's well worth your listen. I have Karissa Lemme here today. Thanks for coming, Karissa.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
I wanted to talk to you because I see you doing so many amazing things in the world. You have been a foster parent. I know you do a lot of advocating for foster children and foster families. And I know you have your own family, and you recently jumped back into working full time, which are all amazing things. And I want to talk about all those things.
Okay.
To start with, though, what piece of your internal drive has helped you do all of these big, hard things in your life?
I feel like growing up the way that I did, we weren't always very well off. My parents struggled a lot. And so a lot of my motivation was to just create a life for my kids that I didn't have, if that makes sense. And that's not to say any bad things about my parents. They did a great job with the resources they were given, but they weren't given enough resources, and um, they weren't given enough to, I feel like, be the best that they could be necessarily. And so my drive has always been, number one, to make sure that, my children got better than what I got. And then once I realized and learned about the foster care system in our area, I really wanted to make sure that that went beyond just my kids and that extended to other children who grew up in households with parents who didn't have the resources, whether it be mental health, counseling, financial, jobs. I mean, the list goes on and on. And I just kind of wanted to be a catalyst for change in any small way or small opportunity that I was given.
So, would you summarize that as empathy for the situations?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot to be said about lived experience and being able to put yourself in someone's shoes. And when you hear someone's story, it's hard not to fall in love with them, and it's hard not to want to help them. You can watch a commercial, all the commercials with all the sad dogs in the world, but when a sad dog shows up on your doorstep, you're not going to close your door in their face. And I'm not comparing children to dogs. I'm just trying to put a real thing to billboards and media and things like that. It's really hard to turn your back once you really, really know someone and once you really, really know their story. And yeah, a huge part of that is empathy. It's a huge piece of the puzzle for sure.
And for you, what took it from logic and empathy into action?
To be honest, it kind of started out as, so my husband and I had trouble conceiving, and we went through kind of some fertility issues. We eventually did become pregnant, and it was great, but I just always pictured like a house full of children. And when that wasn't coming easily to us, we turned to adoption. We thought like, oh, how can we do this? Let's adopt. There's tons of kids that don't have homes. And so when we thought of adoption, we were like, oh my goodness, when we were really looking into it, it's like super expensive, right? And so we thought, okay, well, there's foster care, and we have friends that adopted through foster care, and it didn't cost anything. Like, it cost them the cost of a birth certificate. So we were like, oh man, well, this is the way to go. This is the way to get, you know, get a child. That sounds so crass when you say it that way, but that was kind of like our framework in our heads, was like, this is the way to go about it. So we went to the orientation, like the foster care orientation, and we thought, okay, yeah, we could totally do this. And then once we actually got our first kiddos in our home and met their mother, like, I thought, whoa, my job is not to take these kids and bring them into my family forever. My job is to help this mother who wasn't, again, given the resources, support, financial help that she needed to be a good mom. My job is to take her, help her out all I can, and let her know that when you're going through this hard stuff, your babies are safe with me. Like, I got this, and you take care of you. And it really just kind of started a whole um, kind of like framework in our brains that the solution to the problem isn't to completely remove children from their families. The solution to the problem is to rehabilitate families so that their children can be with them where they deserve to be, in with their own families in their own homes, and we need to be a part of that. And that's the work that we need to be immersing ourselves in. And so that's kind of what started our advocacy work and our work with turning, this need to do something into actual action.
Wow, that's amazing. You found your calling in the middle of all this other stuff. What do you do with all of your personal stuff? Like, you wanted a bigger family. That's not a small investment of time and effort. And to kind of set that aside and go a different direction, what was that like?
So I feel like with the way that we foster, we are getting a bigger family. We're not just getting more kids, we're getting their parents and like kind of like pseudo siblings. We're getting to be a part of their greater village, and that extends our family. And when we go trick-or-treating, it's not just us and our three kids, it's us and all of our kids and all of their parents, like traipsing down the sidewalk, asking people for candy. And it's just such a rich, it's so much more of like a rich, fulfilling experience doing it in this way. And a lot of people ask us like, oh my gosh, how could you be a foster parent? I could never do that because saying goodbye would be so hard. And I agree, saying goodbye would be terribly difficult. And that's why we don't do it. Like, we say goodbye to like having the child in our home, but we're not saying goodbye to the families forever. And doing that really helps us have a lot of closure in the situation. A lot of people see kids reunified and they don't see them again, a lot of foster parents. And we get to have the closure of like knowing like their family's doing great. We have ones that their baby is due like any day, and our number is up there for them to call when they go into labor. And it's really cool knowing that like, we can be those people to them without taking their without taking their kids. They still deserve to be a whole unit and a whole family. And it's really neat being part of that work because I don't feel like we've really had to sacrifice our home full of kids, and we haven't had to sacrifice any big grandiose pictures that we had in our head. It just kind of shifted and looks, I feel like, a whole lot better than we had planned in the first place.
That's really beautiful. Um, just being a novice to this whole system, what makes the way you foster different than someone else? Is that something you choose into and you say, this is the kind of relationship I want to have with the parents?
Yeah, so the whole system is slowly shifting in this direction, and it's such amazing work to be a part of and to help spearhead. I guess the old school way of fostering is like when kids get dropped off for a visit, the foster parents go through one door and the birth parents go through another door, and they really don't meet each other or they don't see each other. There's not a lot of communication, there's not a lot of transparency. And the system is hopefully, and I've seen it happen in a lot of jurisdictions, sort of shifting in a way that makes these partnerships important and valued, and almost like setting a rule that like if you're going to be a foster parent, you're going to do this. And I help now lead trainings that people go to become foster parents, and I'm telling them a lot of the times like, if you're coming here hoping for adoption, you're essentially coming here hoping that these parents will fail.
Yeah.
And that's really not the type of person that we're looking for to help us out here. So either you can continue going through this and you can see what we're about and you can see how beneficial and how helpful you can be in this framework, or you're going to have to, find a different avenue to pursue.
If people want to pursue this philosophy for being a foster parent, is this something specific to the county you're in, or are these trainings that you're giving online to whomever would like them?
So, this actually dives into my job, so it's kind
Oh,
of a good
perfect.
shift. So I work for an organization. It's called the Quality Parenting Initiative, and that's part of what we do. Is we um, try to kind of reframe foster care and show people that this is the way to do it. It's research based. It's backed up in several studies that if the true goal is to reunify the parents, then you need to work with them as equal partners. And you think back to if I don't know if you're a child of divorce, but like children of divorce, they often can see their parents squabbling back and forth. And when they're at mom's house, mom is saying mean things about dad. And when they're at dad's house, dad is maybe not saying the nicest things about mom. And when they transfer from mom's house to dad's house, maybe they meet in a parking lot and they get out of the car and they walk by themselves from one car to the other car. And mom and dad aren't really communicating. And when they do communicate, it's volatile, it's unhealthy, and it's yucky to watch,
Mm-hmm.
and it's damaging. Essentially, it's damaging. And we know through loads of research that when parents work together, that children are better off in all relationships, in divorce families, and especially in these co-parenting relationships, or I like to say co-caregiving, because I don't want to claim the role as a parent, but I will say that I'm a caregiver. And so in these co-caregiving relationships, when you're working together, um, reunification happens faster. Kids are happier. They're not having to choose a side. There's no hero and villain. No one is pedestaled over the other person, and it really makes for a more symbiotic relationship, and it makes for faster reunification. And so the work that I do is a nonprofit, the Quality Parenting Initiative, and we are in several jurisdictions, and we're working our way through, and we're in most of California. We're in lots all of Nevada, Connecticut, and we're just slowly increasing and growing. There are other initiatives doing similar work, and it's really awesome to see the whole system kind of shifting. And as a foster parent, we want foster parents to know that you have an equal voice at the table. This work is important, and you can be heard. And it takes sometimes being like a squeaky wheel, but your voice matters, and you should be able to have these relationships with the parents, barring safety issues and things like that. It's something that is so enriching and fulfilling to the kids. And that's the whole point of foster care, right? To
Mm-hmm.
make sure that they're not going a single day without being loved, cared for, parented, and feeling safe.
It sounds like you're just expanding the parents' network. They're getting more support. Instead of being replaced, you are continually in their lives, you're loving their children. I mean, thinking of a situation where my kids would have to be taken from me would be completely devastating. I think that piece would get in the way of whatever work I would need to do to regain them, and to know that someone's loving and caring for my child. I can't even, sorry, I'm tearing up. Can't even imagine how helpful that would be. Um, and it sounds like these kids are being able to be kids and they have one less worry to worry about, their parents squabbling, their caregiver squabbling. And that's really amazing.
When my kids go to even my mother's house, who I love and who I trust and who loves them with more than she loves me, when when they go to her house, I write down things that I expect of my mom. Like, please make sure that Veda has this blanket or this nightlight when she sleeps, or else she can't sleep very good. Please make sure that Nora reads a couple chapters in her book before going to bed. Please make sure you rock Isla to sleep and rub her back counterclockwise. Do whatever. Like, I'm writing like an entire manual for my own mother, who knows my kids very well, to watch them. And so if you put yourself in the shoes of these parents whose kids are being taken away for whatever reason, they're still their children and they're still loved. And I mean, most of my kiddos, especially our first ones, I was talking to their mom recently, and she said, I didn't even know where they went. I didn't know if they were like went to the police station. I don't know if they're at some group home. I don't know if they were sleeping at the social worker's office. I didn't know where they were. I don't know if they were in their facility. And she said, like, if I would have known they were in a home of like a family with like a dog that like goes to the park and goes hiking, and they were in like a loving home, I would have felt so much better. And so a huge part of our work is making sure that within those first 12 hours, a connection is made. And you're saying, like, I'm not here to take your kid, but I'm here to keep them safe. Also, what foods do they like? What are they allergic to? Could you imagine if you got a child who was like allergic to nuts and you
Yeah.
had no idea? I can't even fathom that the whole trauma can be skipped by a phone call. And it's such an easy thing to do that we're overlooking in the system because we're trying to keep kids safe. I'm using air quotes. Keep
Hmm.
kids safe by what? By making sure that yeah, maybe they're out of a harmful situation. We want to also make sure that we're limiting trauma by putting them in a situation that's like less harmful and making sure that they are, watched after. And when you have these conversations, not only does it help me to get to know their child, does he sleep with a nightlight? You know, does he like broccoli? What does he pack in his backpack? It helps mom too have the empowerment of knowing that she's the one that knows her child best.
Hmm.
and it kind of like gives them a little more, just a little more say in the situation that feels so out of control for them.
I would imagine it would feel less hopeless when you can keep that connection. There's so much trauma
Yeah,
with disconnection, and those ties keep us in the space of healing. That's really awesome that you can be a part of that.
definitely.
What needs to happen to expand this method of fostering in America?
I feel like it's getting there. A huge part of any change in social work and child welfare is just like red tape and bureaucracy. I mean, these poor social workers, I always joke that they have to like clock out every time they take a long yawn. I mean, they have to clock out and clock back in, and they have to like every time they're having any sort of connection with anyone, whether that be youth, foster parents, biological parents, there has to be a paper trail. And I totally understand that and I totally get that. But a lot of times you can't just say, hey, we're going to have a phone call within that first 12 hours. There has to be a couple of meetings. There has to be a form that both parties fill out with their phone number on it. There has to maybe we should create like a script for the parents to say back and forth, or like some prompts that they need to ask. And it just like bureaucracy and red tape just really limits things from happening honestly at a speed that it needs to. And so what we're doing is just leading, I guess, by example and showing them that like this can be done. It does take time, and we're sharing real stories from real people who have been affected, whether or not who have been affected by child welfare. And this is what it looks like when these things aren't in place and these things aren't happening. And this is what it looks like when these things are in place and when these things are happening. And which one would you want to be in if it were you? And it's really like putting yourself in their shoes and turning turning the table back to listening to these stories, because I feel like the stories are really what what helps change people's minds.
So your organization is educating people. Are you educating lawmakers and social workers themselves and hoping that they then go and change the policies?
Yeah, so a lot of the change isn't going to be made from the bottom up. Oh, most change happens from the top down. And as um, difficult as that truth may be, you would just have to have buy-in from certain people in order to make the change happen. And so, yeah, we're educating and working really closely. And we have tons of people who are seeing the benefit and who are working with us to help move along the work quicker. But we're working with judges, we're working with lawyers, we're working with child advocates, we're working with social workers, definitely. We're working with managers, and we're definitely leveraging the people who want to help us who have real lived experience. So foster parents, birth parents, former youth in care, current youth in care, and just really using their stories to share how important this work is. But yes, it does take buy-in from certain people or directors or commissioners, and we luckily have an amazing team of people who have just contacts and networks everywhere. It's just incredible when you talk to someone and they're like, "Oh, I know a guy in Philadelphia," or "Oh, yep, I am familiar with this person in Florida." And it's really cool to like be a part of something that feels so much bigger than you. And I'm constantly pinching myself every day, like, how did I get here? How did they choose me? Like, how am I here? But it's been really neat to watch and to see the work go forward and happen.
What triggered you going to Quality Parenting Initiative?
So the beginning of the pandemic was a year ago, which is insanity.
Mm-hmm.
We had 6 kids at the beginning of the pandemic. We had 3 biological daughters, whom we still have, and we had a sibling set, and then we had another child. So we had at the start of pandemic, we had a 9-year old, 2 5-year olds, a 4-year old, a 3-year old, and a baby. Right? Is that 6 kids? And so we were like, our world was rocked completely upside down, and I was home distance learning with all of these kids, and I thought, oh my gosh, like I am in way over my head. This is not something that, and I was already kind of like thinking about going back to work and thinking about like what would this look like or how would I pull this off. And my husband's incredibly supportive and, you know, said like whatever you need to do, we can do it. We can like tackle it, whatever. If you want to go back to school, we can do that. If you want to go back to work, we can do that. Like we can do whatever. But I just never pictured it happening so quickly. And then at the start of the pandemic, I was just like really itching for some um for like a way out. That sounds so
I
terrible.
know what you
But
mean.
it was so it was so hard, and there were some terrible moments. I mean, just not good parenting moments. My kids were always safe, but it was just really difficult. And I had always done volunteer work for the Quality Parenting Initiative locally in our my own chapter, my own county, and so they had kind of knew who I was, and so they reached out to me and asked me to speak at their conference. They have like a year-wide conference. And I really wanted to go to the conference, but I couldn't go because it was like in San Diego and I'd have to leave. But this year it would be virtual. So I was like, yes, totally, I can do that. And they wanted me to speak on co-caregiving. And I thought, well, why don't I bring on a parent that I co-caregive right now with currently? And they were like, oh, yeah, totally. And so she and I got to speak to like this group of couple hundred people over Zoom during this conference. And it was like a really neat experience. And then after that, they had reached out to me and they were like, hey, we want to offer you a job. And in typical years or typical times, I would have felt like this is not the right time. I need to focus on being a stay-at-home mom. I need to, this isn't my time. Like I was feeling very much tied. I feel like I would have felt very tied down to um, having to fulfill all of those stay-at-home mom duties. But because of the way that the pandemic has unfolded and tons of work is happening virtually, it was kind of the perfect time to jump in and be able to do so from home because outside of the pandemic, this work requires a lot of travel. And so it's really nice to be able to kind of like get my get some training wheels in doing it and in getting to know people on a virtual platform. And then when things start opening back up, I'll slowly get to kind of like move into like the more of the typical role of traveling and speaking. But yeah, so the pandemic kind of like forced me into work. Not forced, but it really kind of sped up my timeline for going back to work, I realized.
You said self care is important to you to be able to maintain this space to do this really needed but hard work. What is your community support look like during this time of fostering and then going back to work?
So yeah, my husband's very supportive. We, I mean, our community has definitely shrunk in the time of COVID. We have like one family in our little pod that they're like our neighbors, and they're the only people that we've gone inside their house and we've let inside our house. With my job, it affords us to be able to have childcare. And so it's really helpful to know that my kids are watched over and my kids are safe. And it's nice to be able to let go of that guilt. Um, or last week, our my daughter just actually started childcare last week. We had had like a nanny up until this point, but it was just getting too loud with everyone in the house. So I was like, you guys got to get out. And so, we still have her nanny part-time, and then we have part-time childcare for my toddler. And she'd sent a video of my daughter sitting on the grass, and they were reading a book together, the childcare provider and my daughter. Childcare provider is a wonderful, great friend of mine. And they were sitting there, and this video was like 6 minutes long, and they're reading a book together about ladybugs. And I thought to myself, I would never be able to do that. And that sounds terrible. But like I was not ever the type of mom that liked sitting on the ground and playing with my kids. And that sounds terrible, but that is what she is. She is that type of mom. And I feel so blessed and so grateful to be able to like utilize that talent of hers. And I feel grateful that she's willing to share that love and that patience with other children. And so at first I looked at it as like a huge guilty moment, like, gosh, I should be the one sitting on the grass, reading about ladybugs, talking about how they have black spots. And then I like kind of took myself out of the moment and thought, you had that chance, Karissa, but that's just not the kind of mom you were. We were always just on the go and on the move and, you know, dropping kids off here and dropping kids off there. And I was constantly chauffeuring kids around, and being able to have, like you said, a community, whether they're paid or not, to come in and clean my house. It's huge to help watch my kids, to help give my kids rides to places is huge. And knowing that like there are other people that have to be employed in those areas. There are people who make their livelihood off of cleaning houses, and I need that help and I need that support. And so everyone just kind of like helps each other out, and I'm grateful that we've been able to afford all of this. And that's just something to be said about our jobs, that they value hard work and they compensate accordingly. And it's wonderful to be part of a community that is so supportive. And I always tell my kids, like, how boring would it be if everyone had the same job? Or how boring would it be if everyone acted exactly the same. That would be so boring. We need to all come together and utilize the different parts of our system to work together as a whole and to bring each other up. And so, yeah, I have a really good supportive group of people that kind of rally around me.
Thank you for sharing that. I know for me, that piece of asking for help is really hard, whether it's relying on a neighbor or hiring somebody. But I think that's the kind of stuff we have to talk about more because it enables us to be our best selves. And I've actually like been working with a therapist on this piece where it's like someone else taking care of my kid is not a failure for me. It can actually be adding something to my child's life that I can't give them. They're actually getting
Yes.
something else from this person, exactly like what you said. Like I wouldn't be doing that anyway. And it's been this shift in my mind that I don't have to do it all myself. And it can
Yeah.
actually by relying on other people, it can actually be done better and we can all be moving in our own passion and our own energy and like we can be energized by our experiences. And it's just really freeing and I'm still like getting through all the muck that is in the way of me fully realizing that piece, but
Oh, me too, sister. Yes.
it's hard and like
It is
the
hard.
guilt, like that reflex to be guilty is so there. um what do you do in those moments when that guilt flares up?
So I remember when I didn't fully make the decision to become a stay-at-home mom when we had our first daughter. I sat down with my boss and I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna be gone for like 6 weeks." And she's like, "You're gonna be gone for longer." I was like, "Nope, I'll be back in 6 weeks, mark my words." And she's like, "All right, well, I'm leaving the door open for you. 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years, you can come back whenever." And I thought, okay, well, I'll see you in 6 weeks. Like I literally thought that because there was a narrative in my head, whether it be from like growing up in the family that I did, whether it be growing up in the culture that I did, that was, I'm not going to let someone else raise my child. And
Yes, I know exactly what you're saying because that is the voice in my head too, and it's incorrect, but I'm working on it.
it
Keep
is.
going.
Okay, but like our kids go to public school, right? For 6 hours, 7 hours a day. Are our parents raising or are the teachers raising my kids? No, I'm raising them. Just because you wait until they're just because they wait until they're 5 to be, under someone's watch per se for a certain amount of time doesn't mean that if you put your toddler in childcare that that person is essentially raising your child. And so what what I have to do to get rid of the guilt is just knowing that I am such a better mom when I have this space to work. And my kids, I feel like, being siblings of foster children, have been able to have such a rich experience of seeing these kids come from places that they could have never experienced or witnessed or been a part of. And so if it takes me taking a little bit of focus off of my kids who are very privileged and have everything that they need in life, if it takes me taking a little bit of focus off of them to focus on making this whole system better for all of the children, then that's the sacrifice that I'm willing to let my kids make, so to speak. And so part of that guilt really gets washed away when I know that I'm doing the best that I can and this work is important. And if I was a waitress, the work would be just as important, like people have to eat.
Mm-hmm.
People have to stay in hotels. People, you know what I mean? So it's like the whole entire ecosystem contributes whatever they have, whatever talent they have to make this whole world work as a whole. And I'm part of that. And the work that I do helps me feel fulfilled. And my kids deserve a mom that's fulfilled, right? And it's a constant narrative that I'm having to like talk to myself in my brain about.
Mhm.
But I'm getting there, and we're all better off for it, I think.
Yeah, one of the exercises I've done that's helped me with that is to say, okay, what kind of an example am I setting for my kids? Do I want them to think that
Yes.
a parent, a mom, a woman is there to sacrifice everything, or do I want them to feel empowered to do the things that they're put on the earth to do and be really confident in that? And if I'm not totally confident in what I'm doing now and I have a desire to change it, then that's what I want to do because that's what I want for them. And that's still not like the best mindset to be in. Like I want to be doing things for me, but when I start comparing myself or what I feel like my kids might lose out on, it's like, oh yeah, this is a healthy thing. This is me learning how to rely on other people, and this is what my parents want for me. This is what I want for my children, and it's going to make the world a better place if we can be healthy in those approaches.
Yes, for sure. It's funny because I was bringing up like my Facebook memories or whatever. And 7 years ago today was like the worst parenting moment on the face of ever. I had had such a terrible day. I only have one kid. Um, and I was very pregnant with my second. And I was just having a terrible day. And I got home and just handed my daughter to my husband, and then I just drove away. Like I didn't say anything. I didn't talk to him. I just got in my car and I drove. And I was like, oh my gosh, I am not meant to be a mom. Like this whole time I grew up in like a system in a world where that was like the pinnacle and that was the only thing that was important in life. And I am not doing it right. And on like my Facebook 7 years ago today, I had checked into like a Barnes and Noble, and my status just says, just so my husband, just so Nate knows that I haven't driven off a cliff. And like, and I was thinking that, and I was reading that, and I thought like, that's where I was. Like that's where I was, and my daughter doesn't deserve that mom. So whatever it takes to let her know that like she can fulfill her passions and she can follow her dreams, like what better example is a person than a mother to do that? And if your passions and your dreams are sitting and reading a ladybug book with your toddler, like that's beautiful and that's wonderful and that should be celebrated, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And if your passions or dreams are, like singing or whatever, that's beautiful and that should be celebrated. But in the end, it just matters that you feel like you've accomplished what you've set out to do and that you feel worthy and you feel fulfilled.
That's really beautiful. Thank you, Karissa. That is a really great note to end on. Any other advice to parents who are considering fostering or considering entering the workplace? We've covered so many amazing things.
um I think just do it. I feel like at the beginning, and I still struggle a lot with like imposter syndrome. I don't know if you talk about that
Oh
or
my gosh, like every episode.
oh really?
We
Oh
talk
my
about it
gosh.
every time because everyone is
Yeah.
going through it and it doesn't seem possible. I'm definitely the only person with imposter syndrome. But
That's
when
so
you
good to know.
but every other person has it. And whether you are a stay-at-home parent or a CEO, everyone has this. So please talk to us about it because this
Oh
subject
gosh.
does not ever get old. And there is so much more I can learn about this.
I feel so validated knowing that I'm not like the only one that feels like, I'm totally, you know, being an
Everyone's
imposter.
BSing it. Everyone's
It's
BSing it.
so true. But I really feel like that my boss has assigned us to all read this book, and it has like a whole section on imposter syndrome, and it was like so eye-opening, and it was really cool because it talks about how imposter syndrome is a good thing. It's fuel to do more. It's fuel to try more. You should use it to your advantage, and the only thing that comes from self-doubt is growth, right? And so if you have that imposter syndrome, you can work harder because if you're confident, you're complacent, right? And so if we never worry about letting other people down, we might actually let them down. But if we feel like imposters, we constantly are feeling like we have something to prove. And there's something great to leverage from that. And
Mm-hmm.
it can motivate us to like work smarter, and it can make us better learners, and it really can fuel fuel us, and it puts everyone kind of like in a beginner's mindset, and you're able to question a lot of things that other people take for granted. And so I've learned to leverage it and own it, and to use it in a way that like fuels me to keep getting better and to keep learning more, because when when you're humble, when you have that imposter syndrome, you realize that there's so much to learn. And I feel like it makes you vulnerable and open to growth. And so I've been really trying to remind myself that this is not such a bad thing. like like maybe feeling less than, and it's not a confidence thing, but maybe feeling like I don't belong is actually really fueling me to prove that I do belong, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's just helped a lot, kind of reframing what imposter syndrome can do for me in the workplace and as a mother and as a wife and as everything.
Okay, what's the name of this book? Clearly, we
Oh,
all need to read it.
it's called Think Again by
Okay,
Adam Grant. Yeah, it's really
okay.
good.
Put that on my list. That sounds awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, he talks about like just finding new ways to do things. And that's what we're trying to do at the Quality Parenting Initiative. We're trying to like reframe how people have been doing a work that's been done a terrible way for so many years. And if we just kind of like tweak it, and maybe it's like, the um, getting away from the narrative of, well, we're doing it that way because that's the way it's always been done. Well, that can be extremely harmful. And so if we think again and reframe things, it really can help, makes a lot of space for growth.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. That is a healthy little binary switch to flip in the head. Think about it in a different way.
Yeah, it's hard. You have to like constantly, you know, say the narrative over and over, but it's catching on for me.
Well, thank you so much. Do you have any places where people can come follow your work or maybe your nonprofit's work?
We're just the Quality Parenting Initiative, and yeah, we're doing lots of good things, especially during COVID. It's amazing that you can connect so much more. It sounds funny because the connections aren't happening in person or, like real life, but you can reach so much more people in this platform of virtual conferencing and virtual learning. And yeah, we're doing a lot of really awesome webinars and really great work there. So there's a Facebook page, and yeah, lots of things going on there.
Great. And if there are people listening who would like to try and help in the fostering space but aren't ready to bring kids in their home, particularly during COVID, what is the best way that they can support that system?
That's a really good question, because I feel like not everyone is called to necessarily be a foster parent, but there's space for everyone to be able to help. And just call on, like, reach out to the people in your life that you know are fostering, and just, I mean, a huge part of it is what every parent needs, like maybe a meal every once in a while, maybe being able to watch their kids so they can go to the store, maybe texting them when you're at Costco saying like, do you need anything? I'm here. Just all the little things that you would do for your friends. Foster parents probably need that like times 10 because it's really taxing having to, you're not just parenting another child, you're rehabilitating their whole family. And that looks like a lot of appointments and a lot of phone calls and just a lot of exhaustion spent on conversations and um, connections. And it's really a work that is just hard. And so having my community and having people check in on me is just invaluable, and it keeps me going. So if you can be that to someone else, it's going to keep them going, and It's huge.
Great. Thanks so much, Karissa. I
Thanks
really
for having me.
appreciate your vulnerability and all the work that you're doing in the system. I know that you're making a big difference, and it sounds like you're working with a really great group of people.
Yeah, I'm very, very blessed. So thank you.
All right. Thanks so much for talking with us today.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us today. The Women of Ambition podcast is a Big Round Schoolhouse production, edited and hosted by me, Alyssa Calder-Hume. For show notes, please visit bigroundschoolhouse.com. To contact us or suggest an interviewee, email alyssa@bigroundschoolhouse.com or message us on Instagram at Women of Ambition Podcast.